My name is Mike Pietrzyk, and I'm a member of St. Andrew's Catholic Church for the past 35 years, and I give presentations on the Shroud of Turin. First of all, it's probably been 10 to 12 years since Pam and I attended Mass here, and we had family members that moved away, so I came in to get acquainted with the setup and attend Mass and also make the announcement. But I got to tell you, the Holy Spirit is very vibrant here. It's just hearing you folks sing. And the last song, as I moved up front here, it was just phenomenal. So anyways, thank you for allowing us to participate. But I've been doing Shroud presentations for approximately 3 years. Tomorrow might be, I think, number 25. I've given quite a few in Southwest Virginia. Very fortunate last year, I gave one in Glasgow, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Aberystwyth, Wales, and I've been invited to go back and give presentations. My presentation, slide presentation, is approximately 50 to 55 minutes long, followed by questions. It's in two parts, basically two parts. The first part is about the scientific mysteries of the cloth. Scientists have no explanation how the image got on the cloth and all the aspects that relate to it. The second part, I go through total detail of what the man went through, what the images of the man we went through. He was crucified, crown of thorns, horribly scourged, his side was pierced. All this comes up on the shroud, and I will go in that total detail. I believe most Catholics do not realize the totality of what Jesus went through. And I guarantee that you're going to hear something tomorrow that you didn't hear or know about what Jesus went through and the torment and all those aspects. It has drawn me so close to Jesus. It is just marvelous in my walk of life now and what I do for him. And so I want to invite you tomorrow. I think it's at 10:15 across the street right over here somewhere in one of these buildings. If you have a chance to attend the presentation, if you have a family member who does not know or realize what Jesus went through, who have their doubts about Jesus, bring them to this presentation. I'm not going to necessarily change their mind, but I hope to plant a seed that they'll understand and maybe open up the Bible and read about what Jesus went through. So anyways, thank you for this opportunity, and if I see you tomorrow, great. And if you have any questions afterwards, I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you. Have the DNA of Jesus to compare it to the cloth. However, from all the scientific clues that are on the cloth and all the science questions that have no answers, hopefully you can have your own faith conclusion. As indicated, I do have permission for the following slides. My goal is to explain the shroud in 8 parts. First, give a simplistic historical overview. Second, prove the existence of the shroud with evidence in the Bible. Third, discuss the initial worldwide stir caused by photographer Shroud of Turin in 1898. Come on in, folks. May have to get some more seats out, I'm not sure. More chairs, maybe? You need more chairs, maybe?
We can get all the chairs out that we have in this building. So if you can see everything like you can just put in, and then people on the outside.
Number 3 was photographer Shroud of Turin. He created a little stir in 1898, the first photograph. Number 4, next level high scientific interest was in 1976 with a 3-dimensional image. 5th, we'll review the Shroud of Turin research project in 1978. Top scientists formed a team to analyze and investigate the shroud, and then we'll review their findings. 6th, we'll review in detail the positive images of the man in question. 7, correlation of the Shroud of Turin and to the suggestion of Oviedo and what it means. And 8, the hypotheses how the image is possibly formed on the cloth. Before I explain the Shroud of Turin, I'll explain maybe how a shroud or burial cloth was used to wrap a body. At the time of Jesus, they would take a burial cloth and would lay it out and take the body and put the feet at the one end of the cloth. And then they just simply overlay the cloth on top of the person. There's two things that are not shown here. One is if there was fluid coming out of the nose, or if the face was disfigured, or something flew out of the mouth, they would put a face cloth. And that was a policy or Jewish procedure, custom, that you would cover the face if it was disfigured, or fluids coming out of the nostril or the mouth. So you put a face cloth on, and then there would be linen strips that would wrap around the burial cloth to keep the body inside the cloth so it wouldn't slide out. The Shroud of Turin is a rectangular 14 feet, 5 inches by 3 foot 7 inch burial cloth. And this was the standard size of any Jewish burial at the time of Jesus. To give you a better view, here's a couple of pictures of the scientists reviewing the shroud. So it's 14 feet 5 inches by 3 foot 7 inch. And then the second slide just gives you a better view of the cloth. This linen cloth is woven in a 3-to-1 herringbone twill composed of flax fibers. Its most distinctive characteristic is the faint brownish image of a front and back view of a naked man with his hands folded across his groin. The image is only on top of the fibers of the threads. Now this is the starting point of the scientific mysteries of this cloth. I'm going to refer back to this a couple of times, because this is a critical point. You've got to understand this in order to build on the other aspects. These are the threads that highly composed, and you can see the light brown image. That is the image of the man on the threads. The image does not go into the body of the thread. It just simply lays on top of the cloth or top of the threads. The image of the man in the shroud has a beard. On this view here, he has a beard, mustache, long hair, hands over the groin, and this is the back side of the man. Back of his head, his shoulders, buttocks, his legs. We have burn marks and water stains, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. The burn marks and the water stains are on both sides of the cloth, whereas the image of the man is only on one side of the cloth. Regarding the history of the shroud, the historical records of the shroud can be separated into two time periods, before 1300 and from 1300 to present. Before 1300, beginning with the resurrection, believing one of the apostles took the burial cloth and the face cloth out of the tomb, there is no strong historical documentation of the shroud until 1300. There's a lot of hearsay information on the shroud before 1300, but no documentation strong enough to be 100% certain. However, there is excellent 6th century correlation with the presumed face cloth referred to as the Sudarium of Oviedo in Spain. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. Third, a burial cloth which some historians maintain was a shroud was owned by the Byzantine emperors, but disappeared during the sack of Constantinople in 1204 by the Crusaders, thus believing the Crusaders took it. We know this shroud was the possession of a French knight, Geoffroy de Charny, around 1353. Geoffroy de Charny died in the Battle of Poitiers in 1356, and his ownership went to his wife, Jean. First, certain written historical dates begin in 1390, when Bishop Pierre d'Arcis wrote a memorandum to Pope Clement stating the shroud was a forgery, and an artist had confessed to making it. This was false, as we know from today's scientific testing, but apparently the bishop was jealous of the shroud's activity. The history of the shroud in the 15th century is well recorded. In 1453, granddaughter Margaret deeded the shroud to the House of Savoy, the king of Italy. In 1532, the shroud suffered damage from a fire at the church of Saint-Bray, France, where it was stored at the time. A drop of molten silver from the silver reliquary produced a symmetrically burnt mark to the layers of the folded cloth. The Port Clare nuns poured water on the cloth, which is evident today, and attempted to repair the damaged area with triangular patches sewn onto the cloth. And at that time, they also attached a vacuum to the shroud. There are 14 large triangular patches and 8 small ones. Also, as a result of the silver reliquary became very hot, the side of the cloth touching it became scorched. So at that time, it was stored in Chambéry, France, in a silver reliquary or silver container. There was a fire in the church. It got so hot, it started to melt the silver container. The cloth was folded like a bed sheet in layers. So as the fire engulfed the church, started to melt the container, droplets of silver fell onto the cloth. Thus, you get the symmetrically burnt marks. The nuns were able to pull it out, and they poured it out. So the W's are the water stains. We also have some water stains here. The lines are the triangular patches that the nuns sewed onto the cloth. In 1578, the shroud was transferred to Turin, Italy. And since the 17th century, the shroud is displayed at St. John the Baptist Cathedral, which was built for that purpose. The shroud remained a property of the King of Italy until 1983, when it was given to the Holy See, the existing pope. The last time it was displayed in public was 2015, exhibition attended by billions of visitors. Because of extremely fragile state, today the shroud is not viewable to the public except during very rare public viewings. The next public viewing for the shroud is scheduled for 2025. So when it was viewed, they would take the shroud, encase it in this casing here, and the people would just line up in front, and they have about 15-30 seconds to view the shroud. So the next viewing for the shroud to the public is scheduled for 2025, and Pam and I are hoping to make that a trip to see it because we have not seen the actual shroud. So this is a very brief history of the shroud. Now we have to ask, what do we know about Jesus' burial in the Bible? John 20, verses 1 through 9, it reads as follows. Now on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came early to the tomb while it was dark and saw the stone already taken away from the tomb. So she ran and came to Simon Peter and to the other disciple whom Jesus loved and said to him, "They have taken away the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." So Peter and the other disciple went forth, and they were going to the tomb. The two were running together. The other disciple ran head faster than Peter and came to the tomb first. And stooping and looking in, he saw the linen wrappings lying there, but did not go in. So Simon Peter also came following him and entered the tomb, and he saw the linen wrappings lying there, and the face cloth, which had been on his head, not lying with the linen wrappings, rolled up in a place by itself. So the other disciple who had first come to the tomb then also entered, and he saw and believed. For as yet they did not understand the scripture that he must rise again from the dead. On John 11, verse 43, a cross-reference to the burial cloth is the raising of Lazarus. Having said this, Jesus called out loudly, "Lazarus, come out." Dead man came out, bound head and foot with linen strips, his face wrapped in a cloth. "Untie him," Jesus told him, "and let him free." So we have historical eyewitness of the burial of Jesus, and eyewitness of the body wrappings and the face cloth of Jesus. With our limited historical data, there were small viewings of the shroud. However, it was not until 1898 that worldwide attention started to occur to an amateur photographer named Totality. Did I read the right one, Pam? No, I did not. I'm sorry, guys. I flipped the wrong sheet here. I am so sorry. That's the first time in 25 presentations. Oh, my goodness gracious. All right, I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself here. As I said, it always seems like the first time. But so what do you know about the burial of Jesus? All right. John 19. First time for everything. John 19, verses 38 through 42. I wish somebody would throw something at me. Later, Joseph of Arimathea asked Pilate for the body of Jesus. Now, Joseph was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly because he feared the Jewish leaders. With Pilate's permission, he came and took the body away. He was accompanied by Nicodemus, the man who had earlier visited Jesus at night. Nicodemus brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds. Taking Jesus' body, the two of them wrapped it with spices and strips of linen. This was in accordance with Jewish burial customs. At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb, in which no one had ever been laid. Because it was a Jewish day of preparation, and since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. All right, so we're talking about the burial of Jesus. The next step we'll be talking about the wrapping. But here are the sequence of events and comments relating to Jesus' burial. So we have biblical evidence. Jesus was buried according to Jewish customs. Joseph of Arimathea was a high-ranking, wealthy Pharisee, and Joseph did follow the strict Jewish procedures. The burial shroud provided by Joseph was a high-end fabric. The herringbone tool was a higher thread quality, so he had higher quality fabrics, and that's what he used for the burial cloth. Although Jewish customs are that a dead person must be buried in 24 hours, the Pharisees did not want to crucify exhibited into the Sabbath, which began at Friday sunset. It is believed that Jesus died around 3 p.m. on Friday. The Sabbath began sunset Friday evening. A few months back, I did a little research as finding out when would the sun set in Israel in April, and it was at 6:55, 7 o'clock range. So after Jesus died, Joseph had to go to Pilate to get permission to get the body. And if you recall in the Bible, Pilate was like, wait, he's already dead? He went to the centurion to verify that Jesus was indeed dead, and then when he acknowledged it, that Joseph was able to go and get the body of Jesus. So he had to go back to the site, at which time probably had to get Jesus out of the arms of Mary, saying, I'll take care of him. So it's very little grieving time for Mary over the death of her son Jesus. Per the Jewish custom, if a face of a dead person is unpleasant, they must cover it. What we know in the Bible, Jesus' face was beaten by the Pharisee guards and Roman soldiers. Joseph would have immediately covered Jesus' face before placing him in the shroud. And after doing the body procedures, then he put Jesus into the tomb. By the time Joseph received permission from Pilate, Joseph and Nicodemus had to hurry to keep all these steps. So I'm estimating they had 3.5 to 4 hours at the most to do the preparation of the body and get it to the tomb and place the tomb before the sun was down. Because Joseph would not violate the law of the sun going down because he was a high-ranking Pharisee. So the next question is, what evidence do we have about the burial cloth in the Bible, which I've already read, but I'll read it again. John 20, verses 1 through 9. I'm going to jump down to line 4, where it says, next slide down. Number 4, the two were running together, and the other disciple ran ahead faster than Peter and came to the tomb first. And stooping and looking in, he saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. And so Simon Peter also came following him and entered the tomb, and he saw the linen wrappings lying there. And the face cloth, which had been on his head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. So the other disciple who had first come to the tomb then also entered, and he saw and believed, for as yet they did not understand the scripture. And then I did the cross-reference of raising Lazarus, where Jesus says, having said this, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, bound in head and foot with linen strips, his face wrapped in a cloth. Untie him. Jesus told him, let him free. So now we have historical eyewitness to the burial of Jesus, and we have eyewitness to the body wrappings and the face cloth of Jesus. With our limited historical data, there were small viewings of the shroud, but it was not until 1898 that worldwide attention started to occur to an amateur photographer named Secondo Pio. First of all, keep in mind that cameras were non-existent before 1800. Secondo Pio was named the official photographer of the Shroud exhibition in 1898. And this had to be a great honor because the Shroud at that time was owned by the King of Italy. The King gave permission for the Shroud to be publicly displayed in connection with the 400th anniversary of the construction of the Turin Castle, Turin Cathedral, and the 50th anniversary of the Italian Constitution. At the time, the idea of photographing the Shroud emerged, which also was intended to help spread awareness of the exhibition. After obtaining King's permission, the organizers chose Secondo Pio. This had to be an easy choice, but Secondo Pio probably had the only camera in the territory. Secondo Pio was an attorney and amateur photographer. He could also be considered a pioneer in the field of photography for using electric light bulbs in the 1890s. And this slide, that's the actual camera that was used by Secondo Pio that took the pictures. It's interesting to note, Secondo's first photographic session on the Shroud on May 25th was unsuccessful. So on the evening of May 28th, Secondo Pio returned for a second session at about 9:30, took a few more exposures. Based on his previous experience on May 25th, he varied the exposure times and the lighting. At around midnight, he went back to develop the plates. Secondo later said he almost dropped and broke the photographic plate in the darkroom from the shock of what appeared on it. The reverse plate showed the image of a man in the face that could not be seen with the naked eye. Secondo was expecting to see another reproduction of the light brown image. Instead, he saw a photograph of a man. So I'll quickly just go through these slides. So this is the frontal view of the man, and when he developed it, he got a picture of the frontal view of a man. And this is, the next slide is the back side. The back side of him, then he got the full back side of the man. He was expecting to see duplication of this. This is what they were going to post up in the city to have people come in and view the shroud. Initially, authorities did not believe Secondo Pia. They thought he doctored the pictures. If you think about why would they believe him? Apparently, no one had another camera. It was 33 years later, not until 1931, when another photographer took pictures of the same result, they realized Secondo Pia was telling the truth. This burial cloth with the light brown image on top of the fibers is a photo negative. No artist to date has been able to create or paint a photo negative. And this was the beginning of the world getting attention to the shroud. I want to go back to my introduction statement before Secondo Pia. Cameras were non-existent before 1800. However, this cloth believed to be 2,000 years old with a light brown image is a photo negative. So not much happened for quite a few years with the shroud until the next big photographic event in 1976. In 1972, in Colorado Springs, product engineer Pietrzyk with Interpretation Systems Incorporated of Lawrence, Kansas, they developed the interpretation system, the VP8 image analyzer. 4 years later, in 1976, Pietrzyk assisted scientists Dr. Eric Jumper and Dr. John Jackson used the VP8 image analyzer on the Shroud of Turin with the black and white photograph of a man. So they took the black and white photograph and they used that under their VP8 image analyzer. The VP8 image analysis revealed that a photograph of the shroud was spatially encoded. It possessed depth information which automatically gave correct 3D images of the face and body. They got a correct 3D image with height and depth. The closer the cloth was to the body, the more the image was highlighted. The image that acts like a photographic negative with light and dark reversed but dimensionally encoded. It is important to note they experimented with lots of other photographs of the faces and images, including paintings, and the result was always distorted, with the flattening of the relief, including arms and the chest and nose pressed into the face. They concluded that there simply was no forgery involved because their images showed absolutely no brushstrokes, which an artist would have produced. Product engineer Pietrzyk, his summary of the shroud is as follows. I'm quoting verbatim. So if you go online, you can see Pietrzyk, who is now so heavily involved with the shroud. This has a transformation of him. I'm taking it verbatim by what he said. Very unique. Only one of its kind. 3D front and back. No other. Nowhere. No how. No way. No way to make it. Never heard how to make it. Just a Shroud of Turin has its 3D characteristic, and this is from the product engineer of the VP8 image analyzer. So how does a correct three-dimensional image come from a cloth that has a light brown image on the outermost fibers? It produces a photo image of a man, and then this photo image of a man produces a correct 3D image, which happens to be the only one in the world. It is this 3D image that significantly raised questions and skyrocketed the curiosity surrounding the shroud in the world of science. Finally, with much reservation, permission was granted for a full scientific analysis. All right, I want to again just recap this scenario. This burial cloth believed to be almost 2,000 years old. The light brown image on the outermost fibers is a photo negative. When you take a photograph of the light brown image, you get a picture of a tortured man. When you place a picture of the tortured man on the VP8 image analyzer, you get a correct three-dimensional image. Again, it's the only one in the world of its kind, and scientists have no explanation. So 2 years later, in 1978, permission was granted to to assemble some of the top scientists in the world. They gathered 33 individuals who were top in their field of expertise. Their goal was not to determine if it was the burial cloth of Jesus, but to determine the scientific properties on the cloth regarding the image of the shroud, and what might have caused it. So these next 3 slides is broken up, full slide of the scientists, and then half and half. The scientists were selected based on science expertise and not their religious beliefs. As a matter of fact, a few of them had their doubts in God. Scientists were from Los Alamos, New Mexico, where they created the atomic bomb. Scientists from Pasadena Jet Propulsion helped give us pictures of Saturn and Mars. Scientists from the Air Force Weapons Lab. Top scientists in the field of X-ray fluorescence, infrared spectral measurements. Top biochemists for tape sampling. The scientists prepped for 2 years, planning an investigation of the shroud. Upon arrival in Turin, Italy, they had 5 days to complete their analysis. They worked around the clock completing photographic floodlighting, low-power X-rays, infrared reflective spectroscopy, infrared photography, testing with narrow-band ultralights, sticky tape sampling of the surface to be tested, obtained pollen samples, obtained blood samples from the lumbar section, 1,000 photographs and photomicrographs. And I have a few slides of the scientists at work. First of all, while they were there was armed guards 24 hours a day watching that they could not touch the shroud with their hands. They had to be had gloves on, and they could not pierce it. This was the only meeting they were able to have, because back then they worked by phone and fax, but this was the meeting that the only meeting they had prior to going to Turin. They created, knowing that you go there, you can't touch it. This is a table that they made and created. It's a floating top table, and the shroud is held up by magnets. Just one comment, this is Barry Schwartz. He was the official photographer for the Shroud Research Project. He has evolved. He is the #1 shroud person in the world. He has shroud.com, and it is through him I got the slides, and I email him every month. He is a phenomenal person. But anyways, just a little note on that. So as you see, the tabletop is floating, and they turned it over. We're doing some sticky tape sampling here, and you can just see the triangular patches are repaired by the nuns, and they're wearing gloves. This is the first time looking at the shroud vacuum was put on in 1500 by the Port Clare nuns, and so they were able to get a lot of particles of debris from the backside of the cloth. They used a high magnification camera on this, and the shroud was broken up in graphs, little squares, and every square was marked when they did their analysis. They pulled information off. They could go back to the reference, what that square represented. This is Ray Rogers. He was pivotal on the STIRP team and other important information. So after working around the clock for 5 days, the scientists took all the work and findings back to the laboratories, and they studied it for 3 years, and then they issued their findings. In summary, the team of 33 scientists and the STIRP team could explain what it is not, but they could not explain what it is. They had no explanation the light brown image was formed on the cloth. And this was one of the main reasons to go to Turin. First of all, the image of the shroud is not due to paint, dye, stain, liquid, scorch, or a photographic process. It never involved the use of a brush or any artistic materials. The image is purely superficial. The image lying only on the surface of the uppermost parts of the fibrils. The image of the shroud is a photo negative. Thus, when you take a picture of the shroud, you get an image of a crucified man. Number 4 is important. Bloodstains are first on the cloth and then the light brown image. So as the body was placed on the cloth, the blood that came from the body seeped onto the cloth. Then you have the light brown image. It's not reversed. We have the image and the blood. You got the blood from the person and then the light brown image. Blood report exhibited human DNA. The blood was found to be AB. This next slide, I'm not going to spend any time, but I'll make a quick note. The blood was found to be AB. And I want to make a quick note on the AB blood that this is very significant to the Eucharistic miracles. Where scientific analysis was completed on the Eucharistic miracles, scientists found little fragments of the heart muscle and blood to be AB. As we continue on, number 6, scientists' testing exhibited that the bloodstream was formed due to bleeding from actual wounds. Number 7, is important in relationship to Jesus, but does not verify that it's Jesus. The bloodstains retain its red color. Anytime you cut yourself on your cloth or on your clothes or whatever, the blood in a little while turns dark or turns brown. The blood stayed red. And here's the explanation. Dr. Alan Adler, member of the STIRP team, was a physiochemist and specialist in porphyrin. He proved the blood in the shroud was real blood. When someone is tortured over an extended period of time, the body goes into anaphylactic shock. After a period of time of shock, the cell walls, the red cells, begin to break down. And then the liver floods the body with bilirubin. Bilirubin breaks down the cell walls of red blood cells, releasing hemoglobin. And when that happens, the blood stays red. And we know that Jesus was tortured over a long period of time. Number 8, photograph the shroud is spatially encoded. It possessed depth information and resulted in atomically correct three-dimensional images of the face and body. Number 9, pollen was found in the shroud only from Jerusalem, Turkey, and other places it resided. You can go to the website on pollen on the shroud. You can have hours and hours of pollen information on the shroud. It's phenomenal. I've only given it 90 seconds of time, but the pollen is very significant in the shroud. And number 10, the burial details are consistent with first century Jewish customs. The size of the shroud is correct for Jewish burial. To be straightforward, I need to indicate there was a carbon dating test that was completed in 1988. 10 years after the STIRP investigation, scientists took a small sample, the size of a small band-aid from the bottom of the shroud. And this is the area the size that they took. This is the actual size, 73 by 17 millimeters. They were supposed to have taken 6 different samples off the shroud. Unfortunately, they only took one area, and they took it right down here at the very bottom of the cloth. This is the high magnification of the area. The carbon dating that was done by the 3 facilities was in of itself correct. All 3 testing facilities had the carbon dating ranging from 1260 to 1390. With the announcement of these dates, there was disappointment that the dates were not earlier, expecting something like 33 AD. It took some of the belief and excitement out of the shroud. However, upon further review of the test area and analysis of the test strip taken, it was found the cloth fibers of the test strip were different from the main body of the cloth. The main issue was that the small test strip taken from the corner of the shroud had been repaired. Keep in mind, this burial cloth, believed to be 2,000 years old, has been handled many times over with the edges getting worn or frayed and having a need to be repaired. Scientists did find that the area used for carbon dating has been repaired. They discovered a different weave and different material, and that material was cotton. So these are the samples, and they get to the edge of the shroud, and there was a different weave, and they looked at it, found that the material was different. It was cotton. Ray Rogers, scientist Ray Rogers, this was a proven fact by Ray Rogers, who was on the STIRP team. Scientist Ray Rogers noticed the fibers in the carbon samples were not consistent with the rest of the shroud, and he even had a separate lab verify his findings. His published scientific conclusion reads as follows. The combined evidence from the chemical kinetics, analytical chemistry, cotton contact, pyrolysis, mass spectrometry proves that the material from the radiocarbon area of the shroud is significantly different from that of the main cloth. The radiocarbon sample was thus not part of the original cloth and is valid for determining the age of the shroud. He proved the sample used for carbon dating had cotton, and the area was detected as repaired area. The shroud is linen, composed of flax fibers, not cotton. So when a master seamstress was repairing the edges, they didn't sew it, repair it like this. They intertwined the threads and perfectly matched them up so that the eye would not see it. It was only until high magnification, looking closer, that they realized that the thread is different going into the body of the cloth. But unfortunately, even with the explanation of the current sampling, many of the skeptics ignore all the other evidence that is overwhelming for earlier time periods. So now we move on to the black and white images of the man. Starting with the facial image, at the top of the head, scientists found multiple irregular penetrations across the top and the back of the head. And I'll have more to say about that in just a few minutes. The white areas is blood. The eyebrows are swollen. The right side, you can see in this, it's just, the right eye is closed. It's all puffy and swollen, much more than the left side. You can just see how inflamed and swollen it is. The right eyelid is torn. So apparently as the face was being punched, somebody may have had a ring on the finger, and as they punched him, tore his right eyelid. The left side of the face is swollen. The nose, the cartilage in the nose is broken. It's out of line. There's flesh missing off the nose, and in that area of the shroud, they found dark particles from Jerusalem. So as the person fell, skinned his nose, got dirt on his nose, and when the shroud went over, they found dirt particles in that area. His beard is missing patches of hair, so his face was just plucked out. The beard was plucked out of his face. So this person's face was brutally beaten. The reference to that in relation to Jesus is Mark 14. It says, the high priest tore his clothes. What do we need any more witnesses, he asked. You have heard the blasphemy. What do you think? They all condemned him as worthy of death. They began to spit at him. They blindfolded him, struck him with their fists, and they said prophecy. And the guards took him and beat him. The crease across the face is a permanent crease. Next slide. That's a permanent crease from all the years of it being folded. This next slide is a positive enhanced image with fluorescent lighting to show red blood. This next slide is the top of the head. This shows a better view of the multiple irregular penetrations from the cap of thorns, penetrations to the lower back of the head. In the case of Jesus, it was more likely a cap of thorns was used versus a crown of thorns. The depiction today of Jesus, we got a nice little woven crown of thorns. Well, that's probably not really the case what happened. As they were scourging Jesus, the Roman soldiers saw a thorn bush off the side, broke a branch off, formed it, put it on his head, and then they pounded it in. So it was not a weave where they took time to weave it nice and neat. It was just these long thorns on the head, and they pounded it in. There's only one person in history we know that got a crown of thorns before being crucified. And there's only one person we know that was punished by the Pharisee guards and then punished by the Roman soldiers. In Matthew 27, verses 26 to 30, it reads as follows. Then Pilate released Barabbas to them, but he had Jesus scourged and handed him over to be crucified. Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium, gathered the whole company of soldiers around him. They stripped him, put a scarlet robe on him, and then they rolled a crown of thorns and set on his head. They put a staff in his right hand and knelt in front of him and mocked him. Hail, King of the Jews, they said. They spit on him. And then they took the staff and struck him on the head and head again, probably pounding in the thorns and mocking him as they went. This next slide, it's important to note that the wounds on the body match perfectly the Roman flagrum. It was a tool device commonly used by Roman soldiers. The handle was probably 12 to 14 inches, and the leather strips would probably be as long as the handle. But at the end are these lead balls, which give it some weight and give it an opportunity to penetrate the body. It would also be common, they would insert sharp pieces of stone or glass or metal into the threads of the leather to add more scourging. So go to the front torso. Well, first identify the triangular patches prepared by the nuns. And you see the birthmarks when it touched the sides of the silver reliquary when it was very hot. On the frontal side, there's 120 scourge marks. And you can see the scourge marks across the chest. This is a water stain. On the right side, there's a elliptical wound between the 5th and 6th rib. Interesting, scientists determined this wound matches perfectly with a Roman lance. In the pool of blood on the right side, scientists found serum halo, visible with the UV fluorescent photography. The explanation prior to death The sustained rapid heartbeat caused by hypovolemic shock also causes fluid to gather around the sac, around the heart, and around the lungs. This gathering of fluid in the membrane around the heart is called pericardial effusion, and the fluid gathered around the lungs is called pleural effusion. This explains why, after Jesus died, a Roman soldier thrust the spear through the Jesus' side, piercing both the lungs and the heart. Blood and water came from his side, just as John recorded in the Gospel. With the crucifixion and hell speed of death, the soldiers normally break the legs of a person, but in the case of Jesus, seeing he was already dead, wanted to make sure he was dead, so they stuck the spear into his side, through his lungs, and then to his heart. The reason they break the legs is that as a person would hang on the cross, they would just slightly push themselves up to get a breath of air. So they break the shin bones, the leg bones, and the body collapse, and then within probably minutes, the person dies of asphyxiation. You notice the stomach is scourged. The stomach is also distended and swollen, a characteristic symptom of suffocating death. Scourge marks on the arm, they go all the way down the arms. And the blood runs down the arms as he hung on the cross. Interesting, scientists found that the nail marks go through the wrist area and not the palm area. Today's depiction of Jesus on the cross, many of them, is through the palms. The palms would not hold up a body. Going to the median nerve is the strongest part of that hand to hold it up. It's also the most painful with the combination of all the nerves there, the median nerve. They also noticed that the thumbs are not present on the image. So as the nail goes to the median nerve, it automatically tracks the thumb. So as the nail is driven through, the thumb is retracted and comes out the back side. Scourge marks continue on the thighs, continue down. We have a water stain here. They point out, just noticing the very low distance between the scourge marks on the stomach and the scourge marks on the thighs. Next slide is on the legs, the scourge marks running all the way down his legs. They found skin abrasions on the knees and dirt particles from Jerusalem. We know Jesus struggled carrying the cross. Simon the Syrian was forced to help carry the cross. Jesus was weak and physically exhausted. The Roman soldiers were concerned that Jesus was not going to make it. The feet were nailed to the vertical beam, believing the feet were positioned as such. The right foot was nailed to the beam flat, and then the left foot was laced over the first foot with a long nail driven through both feet into the wooden beam. This would allow the body to stay in position. The crucifixion of the person was to torment them for long hours on end, and the Roman soldiers were excellent at doing this. The one thing they would not want to deal with was the body coming loose while hanging on the cross. This next slide, I just stuck this in a few weeks ago. I came across this. This was by world-famous sculptor Juan Manuel Minero Lopez. He spent 6 years studying all the information on the shroud, the images, the pictures, and he's a world-famous sculptor. And this is how the front side of the man would look on the shroud. Now we go to the back side. There's estimated 240 wounds on the back side from the Roman flagrum, twice the number from the front side. Scientists also determined that 2 men of different heights, one on each side, took turns. And due to the length of the flagrum, they probably had to stand over the body of the person. So these are probably the same Roman soldiers that pounded the thorns into the head of Jesus. Understand the wounds of blows of the flagrum tore open the flesh. This is not just surface wounds. The next slide is the back of the head. Capital thorns result in thorn wounds on the back side. Interestingly, this person had his hair tied back. Notice the raw shoulders. So as the person was scourged, the skin is torn open and placed a heavy beam on it. The flesh is torn and opened up even more, which is very evident of the widening of the flesh. This next slide is the back positive image. The back of the man has multiple lacerations, and again, they fit the Roman flagrum perfectly. We have the repair marks by the repair patches by the nuns. We have a pool of blood along the lumbar area, and this only occurred after the body was taken off from the cross. Now, remind you, we're looking at this image. It's from a light brown image that lays on top of the fibers of the cloth. This is a close-up piece of the cloth. The blood is still red. And you have the faint light brown image of the body. Blood is first on the cloth, so as the shroud went over the man, blood from the wounds seeped onto the burial cloth. This next slide, the buttocks are scourged, the back of his legs. The soldiers moved along the body, scourging it. We have evidence of nail wounds, and you can actually see the back of his feet. The man in the shroud is naked. Present-day image of Jesus on the cross show a loincloth covering him. In reality, Jesus was not spared any special consideration. We can lose real perspective of the real torment Jesus went through. Jesus was scourged naked. Jesus was crucified naked. Now, this is just a black and white image by the world famous architect Juan Manuel Lopez. This is how the backside of the man would look. Our next objective is to discuss the Sugerium of Oviedo. Another important relic held by the church in the cathedral is in the Cathedral of Oviedo, Spain. It is referred to as the Sugerium of Oviedo. Sugerium means face cloth or sweat cloth. It is a piece of cloth measuring 32 by 20 inches. There is no image on the cloth. Only stains are visible to the naked eye, although much more is visible under a microscope. As a reminder, Gospel of John, chapter 20, verse 6 through 7, it reads, Simon Peter, following him, also came up, went into the tomb, saw the linen cloth lying on the ground, and also the cloth that was rolled up over his head. This was not with the linen cloth, but rolled up by itself. Jewish tradition demands that if the face of a dead person was in any way disfigured, it should be covered with a cloth to avoid people seeing this unpleasant sight. This certainly could have been the case with Jesus, whose face was covered in blood from the injuries by the crown of thorns, swollen from being struck, fluids coming out of his nose and mouth. Joseph of Arimathea would have covered Jesus' face. As the sugerium was used to clean the man's face, it appears it was simply placed on his face to absorb the blood, but not using any kind of wiping movement. The history of the sugerium is well documented in the 6th century and much more straightforward than that of the shroud. And this documentation of the 6th century is why I bring this up. If the face of the image of the shroud is placed over the stains of the sudarium, most obvious coincidence is the exact fit of the stains with the beard on the face. Dr. Alan Wenger applied the polarized image overlay technique to the sudarium, comparing it to the image of blood stains on the shroud. The frontal stains of the sudarium show 70 points of coincidence with the shroud. The rear side show 50, a total of 120 computer points of correlation to the Shroud of Turin. In addition to polarized image overlay, the sudarium is also woven in a 3-to-1 herringbone twill, same as the shroud. Blood of the sudarium is also AB, same as the shroud. Also the same as Eucharistic miracles. Pollen from Palestine was found on the cloth, same as the shroud. Myrrh and aloe were found on the cloth, same as the shroud. The studies of the sudarium in comparison of face cloth with the Shroud of Turin are just one of many branches of science which point to having both covered the dead body of the same man. The history of the Oviedo cloth is well documented in the 6th century, and conclusions and correlations of the dating of shrouds need no further comment. Our last goal is to discuss, do we have any idea how the image was formed on the cloth? In trying to solve the mystery of how the light brown image got onto the burial cloth, scientists over the road to analyze and perform tests. Here's a summary of a test from particle physicist Paulo Lazaro. He's the one in the middle. Before I explain his explanation, let me just put up a definition of a particle physicist. Their minds are up here, and their awareness. They are scientists who study fundamental particles, interactions, and make up the universe. They aim to understand the smallest building blocks of matter and how they interact with one another. To study particles, particle physicists use sophisticated equipment, techniques such as particle accelerators, detectors, high-performance computing. They analyze the data collected from experiments, develop theories and models that explain the behavior of particles and their interactions. In 2011, physicist Paulo de Lazaro completed a series of ultraviolet light tests in trying to create an image on the cloth. They did learn something, but were not able to duplicate the occurrence. When physicist Lazaro did his test, he found the rapid dehydration of the uppermost parts of the fiber, so he was able to get something. This was done by short bursts, 1/40th billionth of a second of directional vacuum radiation at an intensity of several billion watts of power. This exceeds all the total capacity of all excimer ARF lasers in the world today. Physicist Lazaro states, the ultraviolet light necessary to stimulate the image on the shroud exceeds the maximum power released by all ultraviolet light sources available today. It will require pulses having duration shorter than 1/40th billionth of a second and intensities of the order of several billion watts. He goes on to say, and I think this is very important, if the most advanced technologies available in the 21st century could not produce facsimile of the shroud image, how could it have been executed by medieval forgery? So the assumption is that our bodies, which are made up of atoms, Jesus' body was made up of atoms, had a burst of energy that was instantaneously, 1/40th billionth of a second. The cross-reference was today's gospel, if you remember, the transfiguration. His face shone like the sun, his clothes became white as light. So that's just an assumption. We still don't have any real idea of what happened or how we got onto the cloth. But it's the fact that a physicist says, if I can't produce it in the 21st century with all my tools, how could a medieval forger create this? In closing, we cannot say with 100% certainty the Shroud of Turin is the burial cloth of Jesus because we do not have the DNA of Jesus compared to the DNA of the cloth. For me and only for me do I make this statement. I have no doubt that it is the burial cloth of Jesus. Before my involvement with the shroud, my faith and belief in Jesus was solid. I've been reading the Bible every day for 45 years, including this morning at 6:30. Every 3 to 4 weeks, I read about the torment, the suffering, the scourging, the resurrection of Jesus. I've gazed at the positive image of the man in question from head to toe, looking at a naked body, ripped apart on both sides, face beaten and swollen, puncture wounds all across the head. Hands are nailed to the cross, feet bones crushed by a nail, chest cavity run through by a spear, red blood on the cloth, and a broken nose. So many aspects of the suffering got to me, but when I was doing my research and I realized that Jesus hung on the cross with a broken nose, his face disfigured, he was struggling to breathe. He was mouth breathing on the cross because his nose is out of the line. Do you know how many words Jesus said while dying on the cross? 57 words. According to Mark, they crucified Jesus at the 3rd hour, which is 9 a.m., and then Jesus died at the 9th hour, which is 3 p.m. 57 words, 6 hours. My presentation is approximately 6,500 words in 1 hour. As they began to crucify Jesus, all that he went through, he said, Father, forgive them. They do not know what they are doing. 11 words. Shortly later, Jesus, while still cognizant, he's looking down through the one eye that's barely open, and he sees his mother Mary, his disciple John. He says, Dear woman, here is your son. Son, here is your mother. During the crucifixion, Jesus is dealing with suffering and close to death. And one criminal asked him to remember him. And Jesus says, I assure you, this day you will be with me in paradise. 12 words. Possibly 2 to 4 hours go by. And Jesus is not saying anything, going in and out of consciousness. I'm reading the book right now, getting through the Diary of St. Maria Faustina. And I just interjected this last week. Jesus tells her, as he has appeared to her, that when he was dying on the cross, he says, I was not thinking of myself, but of the poor sinners, and I prayed to him, to my Father, while he was hanging on the cross. The 3 p.m. range is Jesus' final moments. With a dry voice and dehydrated, he says, I am thirsty. 3 words. Jesus feels the weight of our sins, and he cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me? 9 words. Then last he says, it is finished. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. 11 words. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Please understand the importance of this slide. Scientists have determined the light brown image is a photo negative. You are looking at an actual picture of a man who was scourged and crucified. For some reason, I believe God gives us a picture of his son, Jesus, in the 21st century. You are looking at the culmination of his love for you. My goal was not to convince you the Shroud of Turin is the burial cloth of Jesus, but from the image of the man, you come away with a better understanding of the torment and suffering that Jesus did for you. So that concludes my presentation. I'll take questions. I'll do my best to answer it. And yes.
Does the church have an official statement on the office visitation about Shroud?
The church does not have an official statement. They cannot say that it is the burial cloth of Jesus because, again, go back to the fact that we don't have the DNA of Jesus. It's all the assumptions. You have to make your own faith conclusion. You know, whether you believe it or not, that's up to you. Again, my goal and my belief, it has drawn me closer to Jesus. When I have a full realization of the totality of what Jesus went through, and it's seriously, when I realized that the nose was broken, I started crying in my basement. It was like, oh my goodness gracious, how much more did he take for us, for me, that he went through, and the struggle to breathe. Yeah, questions? One common question that will come up is, how come we don't know there's nothing about the apostles with the burial cloth? Well, I learned about this as I do with my studies and trying to find out about it, but as the Jewish custom, you could not touch a dead body. That made you unclean, and you had to go outside the city, go through the practice, become clean, and go back to the Pharisees. So by them taking a cloth as part of a dead body, the apostles or whoever took the cloth was violating the Jewish custom. And then when they failed to follow the procedures to become clean and go to the Pharisees, they could be excommunicated and they could also be killed. So there was quite a hush aspect about that. Questions come up about, I'm throwing questions out for you that I get in the past is, will there be another carbon dating test? I don't think there will be. I think there's enough information, but the way it's been stored now, it's rolled up apparently in this container. It has a certain gases to keep it from aging. And apparently a number of years ago they did some cleaning on it. It was unauthorized, not saying unauthorized, but not followed up by scientists. I don't think they can gain any more. They would have to cut into the body of the fabric, which is the fibrils, and I don't think the church is going to do it. I don't think that will ever occur.
There is another one that they just did in the last year called waxes, wide angle X-ray scattering technique. They don't need to touch it.
Yeah, there's other tests that have been completed. They call it vanilla test that dates it back to the time of Christ. There's so much information on there that it is a proven aspect of it. Question, what about all these sites? I've gone through all the sites and looked at them all, challenging the shroud, because I have to be prepared in case somebody comes up and wants to challenge them. There's a lot of sites out there. They took a mannequin, they put some red fluid on the arms. It doesn't run the same way as supposed to the cloth, therefore dispelling all the scientist aspects. Until they can produce an example shroud, just like we have here, then it will be, in my mind, it will be false. But I don't think it will ever be done. In my mind, it's because of the situation. Yes?
You said the DNA in the shroud couldn't be compared to Jesus because they don't have his. Could they tell the DNA was from a first century Jewish person?
It's a good question. Well, the DNA, because it's AB blood is only in 6% of the population, and that population is more of Middle Eastern. So that does go directly back to that region of territory, which is Jesus. Yes.
Okay, the face cloth, it did not show the image of the face of Jesus, right? It just showed blood stain.
The sudarium, yes, just blood stains.
Well, then how is it that it didn't show the face of Jesus, but the actual shroud, which was the burial part, shows the face, but the face cloth doesn't show the face?
Well, the only something I can think of, a good question, is that it was a sweat, it absorbed the fluids, it was off by itself, so as the body rose, it did not leave the image onto the cloth. I think it may not have been on his face when he rose. When they put the body in the tomb, but it's a good question, why it's not on there, but that would be my answer, is that it was not, when they put it in the tomb, they probably took the cloth off the face and they rolled it up by itself. The cloth was put on the face so people would not see it as they carried it, to prevent the disfiguration being seen by other people.
Oh, so then they would have taken it off when they put it
I,
around.
yes.